feel kind of bad that the one thing I'm focused on right now is...
Hans Niemann is an angry man. There are so many clips like that kicking about on YouTube. I'll play a couple more later just to round us off. Now, his opponent in round 4 of the US Championship was Abhimanyu Mishra, another guy who's got a face like thunder. Now, he's not known for being an angry kid. I mean, he's just 14 years old. But look at these scowls. I mean, if looks could kill, right? This guy just takes the angriest photos. Absolute death stare when he's playing his opponent. Now, these guys met in round 4. Mishra was leading on 2.5. Hans still in the mix, but coming off the back of a painful loss to Shankland. He said he was up till 5 a.m. going over the game, so we're in for some fireworks in this one. Mishra kicks off with pawn e4. Sicilian from Hans. These knights develop and we get the Rossolimo on the board. Hans goes for the g6 line. We get castles, bishop g7 and pawn c3 preparing to build the big centre. Knight f6 played. Hits the e-pawn. Looks like you want to advance it, but then you give black this d5 square. So rook e1 is a better move. We get castles, d4, and black also now claims some space in the centre. You can take, but it doesn't give white so much after queen captures. There's no knight c3, of course, with a pawn on that square. So e5 is the more testing move, and knight e4 is best. You don't want to go too passive. The knight occupies this great outpost, and now different ways for white to go, but we get bishop takes on c6 selected. Why would you give up the bishop pair? Well, you've changed the pawn structure and you've taken some pressure off the centre here. That knight was exerting some influence, and if white can maintain these pawns here, you're going to have a good long-term game, blunting this bishop and having good space. So bishop e3 now played. But you do leave the protection of the b2 square, and Hans immediately targets that, and this is what black is playing for in compensation for white's centre. B-file pressure, and if possible later you want to take and go c5, liberate this pawn. So queen c1 defends b2. The queen doesn't go to c2 because we're soon going to see this bishop activate on that diagonal. c4 now from Hans, in keeping with the strategy of tying down this pawn, preparing for some light squared grip. You know, white gave up that bishop. We now see this knight developing, challenging this strong piece. So captures played, the knight recaptures, and this supports a later pawn to b3. Bishop f5, and now it immediately comes. Bishop d3, wonderful piece. It's like a bone stuck in Mishra's throat, really in the heart of the position. But watch how he activates around it. First, he goes for pawn h4, a very aggressive move. He's looking to throw that pawn down the board and attack Hans's king. And now Hans goes full Gandalf mode. Pawn h5, you shall not pass Mishra. He stops that pawn in its tracks, but does weaken the g5 square, and bishop g5 pounces straight away, targeting this pawn, also opening the rook. e6 could be in the air at the right moment. And now the computer wants to play pawn f6 here as the top move. White can retreat with bishop f4 and that kind of thing, but at some point you do want to try and chip away at this centre. But rook fe8 played, slightly more passive, and Mishra now finds the right plan. He takes on c4. The pawn recaptures, and he's now freed up control of this e4 square so he can pounce with his knight. He's heading for c5. That will be a monster outpost. From there, it would also pressure this bishop, so Hans has to capture. The rook takes back. Rook a b8, and we've reached an absolutely critical moment in the game because Hans controls that open b file. He's preparing to invade. What's white doing about that kind of pressure which is coming on the queen side? c5 could also be coming to break up these pawns. Well, one of the best plans for white here, which I really like, is the second top engine move. The first one is queen f1, but second one is queen d1. And now if black invades, you can go rook c1, holding the base of the chain. You do drop this pawn, give black an outside passer, good in endgames, but g4, this is now the point. You start attacking, look at all the white pieces pointing at the black king, and even if black invades, just to take it slightly further, you can cover with the queen. The line could go something like this. This pawn's pressured, h5 could be coming, you know, balanced-ish game, but white's got slight pressure here, even for the pawn. But what does Mishra do? He goes rook e2 to cover the invasion square, but it's a bit passive because now queen a5 from hands and he's centralizing and the pawns aren't rumbling for white. Queen e3, queen d5, rook ae1, tripling, 19 points of firepower lined up for e6, but queen e6 blockades that pawn, hands in control, no g4 anytime soon. So queen e4 played, but now rook b5, more control of this square. The other rook could be doubling. So f3 played by Mishra, and now queen d5 offers a trade of queens. Mishra avoids it with queen to f4, because if he captures, solidifies the pawns, well again, these white pawns are under control. Black's got the file, this one could get weak, this one could get weak, you know, not ideal. So we get queen f4 now played, but c5 from hands. Great move. He's looking to rip open these pawns here, and then this c pawn could be very dangerous. But how do you actually deal with that threat? You know, if you play rook d1, for example, well then black can still take, and if pawn recaptures, which is best, you've got a running c pawn. If instead, sorry, pawn recaptures wasn't best. If queen recaptures, which is best, well now you can take back. And what's the best move here? C takes again, the pawn is running. If ever you go rook takes, well this pawn can get very weak. You can already capture it here. So these are some of the problems. That's why Mishra takes on c5. He can't hold the center together. The queen captures with check. Queen e3, and now here you can go queen c7, target this pawn, engine's top move, but hands goes for the end game. We see the queens come off, rook recaptures, e6 now played as a kind of randomizer move, possibly bishop f4 best here, just to try and hold the equilibrium, keep this bishop blocked out, but e6 pushed. Mishra's really down on time now. Cans captures that pawn. Yes, he doubles them, but look at now how his bishop has opened up and Mishra goes wrong. He should take on e7. Now it's a very tactical line because after black takes here, counter-attacking this rook, not even moving this one, well you have to calculate this pawn to a4 move. It's all very complicated, but then there's rook a5. The line goes something like this, really complicated, but when the smoke clears, black has got the rook behind the c pawn, pushing. Now the computer says this is somewhat level because the king starts coming over, but this is so hard to calculate. You know, you hit both of these pawns, game goes on, but white's under pressure here. Mishra couldn't find his way through the forest of calculations to go for that best move, so he plays rook e4. Weird looking move, you know, why not take this pawn? Well, this is his idea. After bishop captures, hitting the rook, he slides it over, attacks the bishop, he has to retreat, and now the c pawn drops, which was looking so dangerous. So understandable play, but the problem is now not only is black a pawn up, despite the fact that they're doubled, but bishop g3, and that king on g1 is getting absolutely hemmed in. So it starts making a run for it. But here again, Mishra does not play the best move. Now king e2 was best, but it is tricky to understand why. Because after check and running up the board, you're dropping pawns, and then the g pawn too. You're still 2 pawns down here, but apparently after rook a4, bishop g5, white can actually generate counterplay, either by picking up this pawn, or if the bishop covers, well then you can do something like rook c4, sorry, not rook a2. You can start invading. The king is a little bit exposed, still looks like it should be lost, but it was the way to go for white. But what we see in the game is bishop c1, but now rook a1 hits this pawn, a4, king e2, sorry, bishop takes on h4, you drop a pawn using tactics, you know, if takes here with check, you're still 2 pawns down, so king e2 played, but now rook a2 check. And here again, best was king f1 to try and hold a balance, but bishop d2. Final nail in the coffin, because bishop g5 comes, and what are you doing about this pin? You know, if rook d4, you can simply, well, you can go e5 and this stuff, but at some point you can just liquidate, then pick up the a pawn, you're 3 pawns ahead, it's overwhelming. So instead we see f4, but the bishop drops, it stays on this diagonal. The king breaks the pin, but e5, the problems persist. If you capture, then the bishop is dropping, so g3, but captures, pawn takes, e5, same tactics going on, so check, drives the king up, then wins this a pawn. This is Mishra's only hope, but now here, Hans takes, he's got 3 connected passes, and the king is running in. Another check, king g4, rook a6 going after this one, but nice play from Hans. He doesn't need all 3 to queen, he only needs 1. So pawn h4, we get takes with check, but the bishop blocks. Bishop b4, now spinning round to stop this pawn. You can already push f2, win the bishop, it's good enough. But Hans goes for this one. We get bishop e7 to win the piece, but f2, rook takes, check, king sidesteps, and resignation, because you cannot stop the f1 f pawn going through. Making a queen, that is game over. Fantastic game from these 2 great players, and here's a clip just to play you out with. More angry Hans Niemann. What a guy, he gives us so much drama and entertainment. I do hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you again soon.
What? Oh! How is he so smart?
How am I this good? Get down and bow down!
You start out with a masterpiece. How would you summarize it?
Chess speaks for itself.
Is it something special doing this against Magnus, Hans?